Back in the 1970s, my uncle used to spend a couple of weeks in his hunting cabin that was in the middle of nowhere up in Canada. Most of the time, his trips were very relaxing and enjoyable. He would head back home afterwards feeling refreshed, having unplugged from society for a bit. He used to tell me that he had some of the best moments of his life sitting on his front step, watching as the stars faded from the sky and the dawn appear on the horizon. He was a real man of the earth who enjoyed being one with nature. I'm surprised he never sold his condo in Wood full Amish. There was one year that nearly derailed his loner lifestyle and scared him so much, he nearly sold the cabin and never went back. It's the most popular story circulated through my extended family, and the reason I'm always triple check my locks before going to bed. Now for some context, the cabin wasn't accessible by vehicle, and there was a small amount of hiking involved to reach it. It was about 400 square feet and was made up of a single room. There was no running water and no electricity. It was a wooden structure built upon a small stone foundation, and because of this, there was about a 12-inch space between the ground and the floor of the cabin. There was a trap door by the fireplace where he would drop extra logs of firewood so he wouldn't have to venture outside to collect more. The incident happened in October. It was extremely cold even by Canada standards. When he wasn't at the cabin, he had the front door locked with a padlock, but upon entering, the first thing he noticed was the hint of tobacco in the air. This confused him because he didn't smoke, and he hadn't been in the cabin since January, but he shrugged it off and got himself settled in. His first order of business was to get a fire going. He lit the lanterns, unpacked, pulled up his chair to the fire, and fell asleep. He woke up several times during the night, always in a state of panic, as if the chair was tipping over and he was falling. But the wind was roaring so hard outside and the cabin walls were creaking so much, he shrugged it off as paranoia. He eventually left his chair and got into bed. He awoke one more time that night. When dawn was just beginning to peek through the window, he shot up in bed when he heard a loud roar of the wind, and through his haze of sleep, he thought he saw a figure outside the window. He scrambled out of bed, knocking over his chair, grabbed his hunting rifle and bolted across the room and flung open the front door. Fresh snow had fallen during the night, but there weren't any signs of footprints outside. He slammed his door shut, put down his rifle and muttered a few profanities as he righted his chair. He opened the trap door, grabbed a few more logs and put them on the fire, and then went back to bed. It should be noted that the lantern was burning low when he woke up, as was the fire, so there wasn't much light in the room. At about 9 a.m., my uncle woke up to the sun shining brightly through the cabin windows. He got up, warmed some water for coffee by setting the kettle down on the shelf over the fire, and then opened the front door. He said what he saw next nearly gave him a heart attack. There were footprints in the snow leading away from the cabin's front door. My uncle, being his normal impulsive self, threw on some clothes and boots, grabbed his rifle, and followed the footprints through the trees with his gun up, ready for confrontation. The footprints circled up the surrounding hills, and my uncle followed them to a spot where the entrance of the cabin was in plain sight. The intruder had clearly crouched for a long while, and the tracks made off at a good stride, further into the woods. Based on the boot size of the footprints, the stranger was just as large as my strapping 6'3" uncle, if not larger, and was clearly expecting my uncle to notice his tracks and come after him, or else he wouldn't have stopped to watch the cabin. He would have continued to run and make his escape. My uncle didn't want to fall into any kind of trap, so he fired a single shot into the air as a warning and made his way back to the cabin. Once inside, he locked the door and opened the trap door by the fireplace. As he poked his head down, he scanned the area under the cabin with a flashlight and discovered one of his own blankets in a dirty, tangled mess in the corner. There were a couple of empty soup cans he recognized from his own pantry, a single spoon, and several dozen small bones, most likely squirrels or rabbits. What my uncle thinks occurred was that somehow an intruder had broken into the cabin while my uncle was away, and had been hiding under the floor the entire time he had been there the previous day. He came to the conclusion that the reason he kept being jolted awake the night before was because half of the chair had been resting on top of the trap door, and whoever was below was trying to escape by lifting the hatch. Later on, when my uncle thought he saw a figure outside the window, he later realized that the figure had actually been inside and was heading for the door, but was interrupted, and the man had likely leaped back down through the trap door when my uncle sprang to life and noisily knocked over his chair. The creepiest thing about all of this wasn't the fact that a complete stranger was hiding so close when my uncle thought he was alone. It was the fact he was hiding in the first place that really calls into question who he was and what his motives were. It was never confirmed how the man broke into the cabin, but was already under the floor when my uncle arrived, which tells me he was going to great lengths to make sure that he wasn't discovered. When he finally emerged from under the floor, he could have killed my uncle in his sleep, but he took the opportunity to run. It's possible that he simply decided that he didn't want to risk the struggle, but I think whoever he is, he was on the run, or at the very least, had something to hide. Earlier the same year in May, not very far away, a 17-year-old girl had gone missing while walking up the road to visit her cousins, and shortly after in August, a 21-year-old woman was found stabbed to death on the very same road the girl had disappeared on. I believe whoever was in my uncle's cabin could very well have had something to do with one or both of these unsolved crimes. My uncle never reported the incident to the police, and to the best of his knowledge, the intruder never returned. But it makes me wonder to this day, are we ever really alone when we think we are? Because if someone could be hiding under the floor in an isolated cabin during the winter, is it really impossible that there could be someone under your bed right now? Disgusted and repulsed, don't even begin to describe what I felt toward my ex-roommate. She was really something else. Moving into the dorms your freshman year of college is supposed to be one of those fun experiences in life, something you look forward to all summer. Well, I look forward to it, at least. Move-in day went well. I was a little disappointed when they told me that I wouldn't be having a roommate. I always envisioned my roommate becoming my best friend and doing everything together, but I guess that wasn't meant to be. The first half of the school year went great. I made plenty of friends and had gotten really used to having the room all to myself. When they told me I'd be getting a roommate in January, I was actually pretty bummed. I cleaned up the other half of the room to accommodate the girl that would be moving in and just hoped that we would get along. She came the second week of January when we had gotten back from winter break. She told me her name was Cassandra, but they just called her Cassie. And Cassie didn't have much. She said it was because her parents never bought her anything and whatever she had bought herself. I think she had maybe 4 boxes in total. I felt bad for her and told her that she could borrow some of my stuff if she ever needed to, but to ask first so I wouldn't think that I just lost it or something. And I quickly realized Cassie wasn't the average 18-year-old girl. She was different. First, she had horrible hygiene. I had to beg her a few times to take a shower in the nicest way possible because she would smell so bad that I actually would gag when I entered the room. She always thought it was kind of funny. She never washed her clothes, which also meant that the clothes that she would borrow of mine never got washed either. She would give me back my shirts with sweat stains and food covering the front. It was like this girl had never been taught any manners or basic social skills ever in her life. But the worst thing about Cassie was her obsession with eating raw meat. And I'm not kidding you. I walked in on her eating cuts of raw bacon one day, and she tried hiding it when I walked in. But there was no way that I could unsee that. I asked her why she was eating raw bacon, not to shame her or anything, but I just was generally morbidly curious. Really grossed out, obviously, but still curious. She said it was something that she'd always done growing up, and that her parents ate raw meat too, and that it was just a normal thing for her. I honestly thought it was completely disgusting, but I also was trying to be a good roommate, as nice as I could, so I told her as long as I didn't have to witness her eating it in front of me, I was cool with her keeping her raw meat in the mini fridge. I should never have said that. The next day, I opened the mini fridge to find it full of pounds of meat. All different kinds too: bacon, ground beef, different cuts of steak, and even some goat meat. When Cassie walked in and saw me staring into the fridge, she looked at me. She was smiling ear to ear, so proud of her meat stash. She bragged about the deals that she found, and before I could stop her, she reached in front of me, grabbed a package of ground beef, opened it up, and started shoving it into her mouth. I almost threw up right then. I was yelling at her to stop, and with meat still in her mouth, she just laughed. I reacted in horror when I felt bits of it land near me, and that only made her laugh harder. The next day, I requested a room change. I couldn't take it, but I was told that that would only be possible in the next 2 weeks. I was fine with that as long as it meant that I could escape the nightmare that was this disgusting person known as Cassie. She really freaked me out. I told her she wasn't allowed to borrow my stuff anymore since she never returned anything in a good enough state for me to use anyways. She was upset, but seemed to understand. We didn't talk much the week after I requested a rule change. She continued to stash all her meat in the fridge, but at least she wasn't eating it in front of me anymore. A couple of days before I was due to move out of the room, I was sitting at my desk, next to Cassie when she walked out of the room. I got a call from one of my friends and leaned back as we talked. I was looking around the room when my eyes settled on her computer. One of the tabs had 3 words that read, "Wanted fresh meat." I laughed and told my friend what I saw. He told me to click on it and see what it was because he was curious, and I never in my wildest dreams would have expected to see what was on there. When I clicked on the tab, my laughing quickly halted. My friend was asking me over and over what it was, but I was too scared to even speak. It was an ad that she had posted on a website I had never even heard of, and the fresh meat that she was looking for wasn't from a cow or a pig or a goat. She had posted a wanted ad for fresh human meat. In the ad, she carefully explained how she liked eating raw meat and had always dreamed about what human meat would taste like. She seemed to be obsessed with it. One line completely caught me off guard and made me want to join the witness protection program immediately, and in it she said, "Eating human flesh has consumed my every thought. Sometimes I watch my roommate sleeping and fantasize about chewing on her." I took a picture of the ad on my phone and clicked off of it so she wouldn't notice I was on our computer. I grabbed my bag and headed out, telling my friend to meet me at the police station. Immediately, I told them everything and showed them the picture of the ad. In conjunction with the university and their concern, they spoke to Cassie about this, and surprisingly, she admitted to everything. They took it as far as actually testing all the meat in the fridge since we lived on campus, but thankfully it was all either beef or pork. I was able to get a restraining order against her, and she was expelled from the university for apparently accessing the dark web while using the school's Wi-Fi and for attempting to engage in illegal activities. Now for a while, people actually compared Cassie to that German guy, Armin Lees, who cannibalized a person who volunteered to be eaten. Who knows if she really would have gone through with it though. I don't think Cassie was ever charged for what she did. I tried to distance myself from her as much as possible. Hearing her name 5 years later would still be too soon. After her arrest, I just never saw her again. I think she must have just moved away out of embarrassment for what she did, but she was expelled from the school and the entire town knew who she was and what she did. There was no escaping the whispers and dirty looks, and I do hope that she got the help she clearly needed. I still don't know how anyone could survive eating raw meat like the way she did. I ended up getting a new roommate after that who was perfectly normal, maybe even a little boring in some ways, but that was totally okay with me. I'll take boring over a cannibal any day. I used to live in a 2-story house in Boise, Idaho. Both floors were meant to serve as a single-bedroom apartment. I lived on the second floor, and the floor beneath me was vacant. I entered and exited the apartment through the back deck, and would walk down the wooden stairs to the driveway. There was a door in my living room that led downstairs to the second apartment, but it was dead-bolted from my side. In turn, there was a door at the bottom of the stairs that was dead-bolted from the other side. The entire time I lived in the second-floor apartment, I never had anyone living underneath me. I would occasionally ask the landlord why that was, and he would always shrug and say that the building had a bad reputation. It had caught fire in the late 80s and 2 people had died downstairs. One extremely stormy evening, I was watching football in my living room when the power went out. I sighed and gathered some candles and a flashlight, and decided that I might as well turn in early, even though it was only about 9 o'clock. I climbed into bed, but since I wasn't very tired, I spent a good hour tossing and turning. When 10 o'clock finally came around, I was about ready to get out of bed and just start making shadow puppets with my flashlight just to pass the time when I heard a door slam from somewhere in the house. I shot up in bed. I knew for a fact that I was alone in my apartment, and no one was supposed to be downstairs. The next second, I heard heavy feet charging up the stairs from the downstairs apartment, and someone had begun putting their weight into the door that led into my living room. I looked out of bed and grabbed my cell phone to call the cops. I locked myself in my bedroom and frantically told the operator that there was someone in the house trying to get into my apartment. There came a tremendous banging on the other side of the door, like someone was wielding a sledgehammer or an axe trying to break it down. The operator confirmed that she could hear what was going on and that the police were on their way. I stayed on the line for what felt like another hour, hysterically telling the operator who my parents were, and to tell them I loved them in case I died. In retrospect, I probably should have just grabbed my keys and simply leaped out of my bedroom window and into the driveway and floored it out of there in my car, but I wasn't exactly thinking straight. I was convinced that I was about to die. When the police arrived, their wailing alarms drowned out the noise of the thunder and rain. They breached the house from the ground floor, and I heard them beneath me screaming, "Police," and the noise on the staircase abruptly stopped. I heard more of the policemen on the back deck, knocking on the glass of the sliding door, and I ran out of my bedroom to let them in. Before I could even ask if they caught the intruder, they quickly rushed me out of the house and into the rain, claiming that the house was on fire. I waited in a patrol car in my pajamas, pretty damn wet and upset as the policemen ran in and out of the building with flashlights. After the fire truck had arrived, a police officer got into the car with me and offered me a towel, and then started to ask me questions about the intruder. I told him all that I knew, which wasn't much. The officer then explained that upon entering the house, the bottom door of the stairs was dead-bolted shut, as was my door at the top of the stairs, and there was absolutely no damage to either door. Upon entering the house, the officers were overwhelmed by the smell of smoke and immediately called the fire department, assuming there were flames raging inside the walls. Despite the smell, the firemen concluded that there was no fire anywhere, and besides myself, there was absolutely no evidence that anyone had been in the house. The landlord arrived shortly after, as I sat in my living room in the dark, drinking whiskey right out of the bottle, muttering about how I wasn't crazy. I definitely heard the sound of someone attacking the door. He told me that the previous tenants who lived downstairs had been a single father and his disabled son. One night, the son had accidentally set a fire to the carpet in the living room, and the father and son were both trapped in the stairway, unable to open the door to the second floor, and had died of smoke inhalation. I moved out the following month.